19, verse 1, and it says this. Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, may the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them. So she threatened to kill him. Now, you would think that if Elijah could stand up to all of these prophets of Baal, that he wouldn't really cave at the threat of one person. Like this one person could not put him in terror, right? But it did. And for our study, let me make two quick observations right off the bat. And that is, number one, that depression often comes on the heels of a spiritual or emotional high. And I know that firsthand. I experienced this a lot of times, almost every Sunday after we've had these incredible church services, that a lot of times the enemy comes into my mind or I have these negative thoughts on Sunday nights. And why is that? I believe many times after a spiritual or emotional high, our emotions have really nowhere else to go but down. And so I think sometimes we even take off our guard with all of these great victories. And sometimes I think there's even a sense of pride or this feeling of invincibility. And that's where a lot of times we find ourselves in trouble. A second observation is that depression often comes when our minds take over. So we're alone and we're ruminating and we think about some things, we fear some things that honestly usually never happens. This is what happened to Elijah. He was thinking about what Jezebel might do, and we have these comparisons that we go through, lies, and we ruminate. I write about this in chapter 6. I want you to really study that chapter. But that's what Elijah did. He let his mind take over. And the Bible says that Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. And when he came to Beersheba in Judah, he did a very bad thing. He left his servant there. He isolated himself while he himself went on a day's journey into the wilderness. And he came to a broom bush, which is a short tree that has just a little bit of covering in a desert. And he prayed that he might die. And he said, I've had enough, Lord. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Now here's Elijah, who had been fearless for years. And at the threat of one person, he wants to take his life. He becomes frightened. He turns and runs out to the edge of the desert and gets depressed. And I think it's a picture of where we find ourselves sometimes. And one of the things I like about the Bible is really how real it is. It doesn't always show these biblical characters as perfect. In fact, most of the Bible is full with imperfect characters. It doesn't show Elijah as this great person who never does anything wrong. Watch this. He was a human and he struggled just like you and I do. In fact, I love this verse in James 5:17. It says, Elijah was a human being even as we are. Now, I can relate to that. A lot of times people look to guys like me because we're pastors, we never have struggles. Honestly, I've had at least 5 different bouts of depression in my lifetime. My first one at 15 years old. One of them as recently as last year. But in 1999, I had one of the worst years of my life. A lot of bad things happened that I really can't get into, but I was just in a depressed place. But I had to kind of fake it in my job and put on the smile and act like everything's okay, like so many people do. And our church always had 21 days of prayer to start a year. And so I started praying and fasting at the beginning of 2000. And I was convinced, honestly, that my problem was not spiritual and that it wasn't even circumstantial. I actually thought I had something biological going on inside of me. I actually thought that after these 21 days, that if I didn't get a breakthrough, that I was actually going to go check myself into some hospital or some kind of treatment to find out what was going on. It was on day 17 of that prayer and fasting time at my church that God gave me a vision, and I'll teach you more about that later in our study. He gave me a picture of what he wanted me to do, and almost instantaneously, this depression left, this feeling of sickness in my soul left. And the rest of that story is I ended up moving to Birmingham, Alabama to plant a church. And so I know firsthand what this feels like, to be in this place of you're supposed to be okay and you're even faking it on the outside, but you're really just not okay. Now, several years ago, there were some pastors in our nation who went through some depression. And in fact, a couple of them committed suicide. I did not know these pastors.